Hi, it's Lee and welcome to Tesla Economist. How bad is demand in China? We're hearing some low delivery numbers for the quarter from people who I even respect too. Hearing delivery numbers as low as 420,000. The reason being because demand in China has gotten so bad. You know, despite sales in China hitting a record last month, supposedly now this month, demand is terrible, and potentially due to the fact that there were so many sales last month. Everyone who wanted a Tesla now has them. This is the theory, so let's explore and entertain it, and use some of our own numbers to see what we can come up with. Firstly, we're dealing with this new logistics method that is being called a gap, as in there is a much larger gap now that we'll expect from production to deliveries, and we saw that last quarter, the number of deliveries being 22,000 lower than production. That caught everyone off guard, and also reinforced the whole demand rhetoric for Tesla. We now expect this discrepancy for every quarter, apparently. But in theory, shouldn't this gap just occur once? In the first quarter, they start this new logistics method, and from there, quarter over quarter, they catch up. Those 22,000 missed deliveries from Q3, well, they counted as deliveries likely in October, when they reached their customers. That was 22,000 additional deliveries we immediately get for Q4. Then, if Q4 also misses its deliveries by 22,000, difference from production, then the 22,000 they missed in Q4 would have been compensated by the 22,000 additional from Q3, hence the catch-up. So this gap logistics method also has a catch-up element too, which no one seems to have mentioned. However, in all fairness, if production has increased by perhaps 30%, then the gap may also increase by 30%. So the gap for Q4 might end up being 6,600 more, or a total gap of 28,600. But like we said, we can compensate some of that with the additional 22,000 we have in October. Therefore, the math would point to a gap this quarter of 6,600. Next up, we have production. Thanks to the CPCA, we even know how well China is going in production. We had about 88,000 in October and November, giving a total of 176,000 already. Then we have December. It has an additional day from November, so that same run rate would expect 91,000 produced for December. However, we're going to humour the FUD and rumours, and we will lose the last week for the Model Y factory, which is likely 15,000 fewer Model Ys for the month, which would reduce the total produced for December down to 76,000. There we have it, 252,000 produced in Shanghai. We can estimate Fremont at 145,000, then we can estimate 30,000 for Berlin and 25,000 for Texas, but possibly more. That is 452,000 total produced, assuming 15,000 lost in some sort of shutdown. Also, assuming hardly any ramping from Fremont, of which we have heard rumours, there should be ramping there too. So therefore, if we then factored in our new gap logistics number of 6,600 subtracted from our production number, we see a 445,500 deliveries number. This would also assume that Tesla are using this new gap logistics method still, and not trying to push out cars for the quarter. To explain again, this would mean that Tesla are delivering 28,600 fewer cars than they produced for the quarter, due to the additional 22,000 deliveries Tesla received from the previous quarter on top of that. Add to that, Tesla already had something around previously another 8,000 vehicles in inventory prior to all of this. So that's the number if we take the reduced production rumour and the gap logistics. Of course, that last week of production wasn't as if all were going to make it to their customers anyway. If a car comes off the line on New Year's Eve, is it going to get to its customer the same day? No, so in reality, it may only be at most 10,000 missed deliveries, really. But what if it's demand that is the issue? Well, in this case, we have 70,000 vehicles produced in December in Shanghai that perhaps all need to be sold domestically in China, which would be even more than last month at 62,000. Right, that does sound a bit tough for Tesla to do. However, it is generally the last month of the quarter that Tesla does sell the most domestically. December is also the biggest selling month for cars, but 70,000 is still a big number, a record number, right? Well, no, in September, Tesla sold 77,000 retail domestic in China. So at 70,000, we're suggesting that it could be around 10% fewer than September. And we've had all these price cuts since then, and insurance incentives too. But we're seeing insurance numbers, and we just got the latest number. It came in at 13,000 new Teslas insured for the week. And if we were to add the remaining 3 weeks in there at that same rate, then we would get an average of 54,000 vehicles total for the month. And no exports counting either. However, there were still 3 more weeks left on this, and we have half a week prior, so it would really be about 60,000 total sales at that rate in China. Well, we also know how many sales we have had come out of China so far this quarter too, 172,000. So if we add 60,000 onto 172,000, then we get 232,000. Then if we add 145,000 from Fremont and 55,000 from the other two factories, we hit 432,000 deliveries. Now, I haven't increased any Gap Cars logistics from the US in this scenario, as we haven't ramped up any production either. And as for Texas and Berlin, the numbers are still low there and shouldn't actually have logistics issues anyway. If we had 60,000 total from Shanghai in December, this would be the lowest month in sales from February, excluding COVID lockdowns and line upgrade months. Incidentally, last December, domestic sales were above 70,000, and the November domestic sales were 31,000. So that was quite a jump from November to December last year, so we could expect something similar this year. And this number is still 432,000 total, not 420,000 as some are suggesting. I think right now 432,000 would make investors happy enough. Sentiment is getting very negative, so even hitting Wall Street estimates right now almost feels like a win. Now, Fremont could actually be closer to 150,000 in production this quarter. Also, a lot of people who talk about this China demand issue made false accusations as to why this gap was happening last year, claiming there were 15,000 missing in China for deliveries. Yes, authoritative Tesla fund managers made up numbers to fit their narrative. And when the actual numbers came out, the number was only 5,000 from China that hadn't reached their customers. It turns out that the remaining 17,000 of the 22,000 total missed were actually most likely mainly from Fremont. At a guess, perhaps 15,000 that didn't get delivered from there. Perhaps 15,000 Teslas that ended up in inventory in the US. I had a look at US inventory, and there does appear to be a reasonable amount in there still. How many is too hard to judge. It could just be hundreds or thousands. But what we do know is they are incentivizing customers to take them before December and save $3,750. Looking at all this, it's actually not entirely impossible that Tesla does have a demand problem. But too many people are trying to place the demand problem in Shanghai, when in actual fact, Tesla probably doubled their supply in China due to this latest ramp, and they're adjusting the price for the new supply more than the drop demand. And instead, the demand issue is actually in the US, due to the fact that consumers are rational and willing to wait until next month to potentially save $7,500 on their Tesla. This isn't something I necessarily believe. I am merely mentioning it to show how easy it is people can draw conclusions in order to reinforce their biases. I'm hoping that this discount Tesla are offering in the US will be enough to get a large part of that inventory sold. Of course, demand is going to hopefully return with a vengeance next month, when the tax credits are available to new Tesla buyers. Looking at these numbers, then I think that Shanghai, worst case scenario, would only drop deliveries down to around 430,000. And then the real unknown is Fremont. If they are pushing these inventory cars extra hard this quarter, then we could see a lot of those 15,000 missed deliveries end up counting as extra deliveries for the quarter. And despite supposedly losing 15,000 sales in China because demand is allegedly down there or a production line is down, there could be an additional 10,000 or so coming out of inventory to increase US sales that much more. Basically, there are a lot of moving parts here, and deliveries could really be between 420,000 and perhaps 470,000. And this is everything everyone knows. We all have the same information. It can just be inferred many different ways. And once some authoritative people start with a narrative, then you're not credible to suggest something else, as you haven't been paying attention to what the analysts are saying. Yet most analysts like to opt for the lower numbers, almost as if they're trying to find the potential lowest, as it would appear that it's best to underpromise and overdeliver. I guess that an estimate of 5,000 lower than the real number is better than an estimate that is 2,000 higher. despite the former guess not being as close to the real number. It's Price is Right rules when guessing deliveries, but personally, I just like to be the closest. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.